Turn that down. Make that big. Ranking every Souls game from the worst to best.
Intro, go. Today I'm going to be ranking every single Souls game from worst to best in my own personal opinion and explaining why I like some games more than others. This list changes a lot for me, but here's what I think right now. Coming in at
Personal opinion.
number 7, my least favorite game in the Souls series is Demon's Souls. Interestingly enough, I also think it's the easiest game in the series. To be fair, I've only played the remake since I don't have a PS3. Sorry, I was too busy pushing children out of my way at Walmart to get a
Just because it's hard, it's easy. Because like actually, Demon Souls remake is pretty good. It's just not hard.
PS5. I probably ruined like 3 kids' Christmases last year, but I got to play Demon's Souls, so, you know, silver lining. Anyway, as much as I love this game and was surprised at how well the gameplay held up after all this time, I still think it comes in last place for me due to the bosses. And I've said this before, I don't think the bosses are bad in this game at all. I'm just not a huge fan of the gimmick puzzle bosses, and that describes 90% of the ones in Demon's.
But like, you still have it below Dark Souls 2? That's surprising, because Dark Souls 2 is like really bad.
Souls. Last time I mentioned that, a ton of people were like,
you'd rather just have a dodging simulator? That's all just reaction time. It takes no skill at all.
yeah, I don't care, it's more fun. I really love the world in this game though, and I think the level design is excellent. It's just not as fleshed out for obvious reasons, and after playing the others, it definitely showed. Certain things like the 525,600 upgrade mats get annoying, especially with the drop rates being ridiculously low.
That's
for
fair.
some. I grinded so much on my first playthrough, I pretty much just do New Game Plus now. The world tendency stuff is fun to mess around with sometimes, but most of the time I forget to skydive in the Nexus, leaving me wondering why I'm all of a sudden trash at the game. On top of everything else, the game is pretty short. It took me like 15 hours to beat it the first time through, and that was during finals week of my last semester of college, but you know, priorities. I will say I find myself coming back to this game more than some of the others, but I think it's because it feels less
I personally don't feel that 15 hours is short, but to each his own.
Stressful than the others, and the world is really immersive to me. And to be fair, my rankings change pretty much every time I play these games again, so this is my current list after completing each game a few times.
For me, like a short game is under 8 hours. If you're under 8 hours, I consider that short. 8 hours is like AAA polished linear game. Like if you're a AAA polished linear game, you're about 8 hours to completion, maybe more if it's a larger game, but like it's 8 to 12 hours. So I'm not too asked about it, especially if I spent the money and I got a really good experience. Like 8 hours of my time for like $50, if it's really good, like is completely worth it.
So yeah, Demon's Souls is last in my mind as of right now, but like I said, it's almost entirely due to the bosses. Next up on my list is Dark Souls 1. I know, get your little hate comment fingers ready. If I was being objective, Dark Souls 1 would probably rank a bit higher on this list, but after my last playthrough, I really just didn't enjoy it as much as the others. I think a lot of this is due to the slower pace of the game with the rolling and running and healing, but it ended up frustrating me more than anything after playing the other games. The combat in this
That's
game
fair.
just never gave me the same rush as the other games, especially with the bosses. Once again, most
And it's the same problem I had with Dead Space 1. Like what he's talking about, like the gameplay itself isn't as polished. Like I really feel the same way about Dead Space. Dead Space 1, like it's a good scary game, but like the gameplay is kind of trash.
of them just felt too easy up until the DLC, where the slow rolls actually started bothering me because they really stepped up the boss fights there. But even with my complaints, I can't deny how incredible the interconnectivity is in this game, and I think it would have been bumped up a few spots if it had continued through the second half of the game as well. There's also just a lot of downtime and running around, which can definitely be fun to a certain extent, but I think they executed that part better in the later games. The boss fights just felt slow, and fighting multiple enemies is such a pain in this game due to your speed, which makes it hard for me to enjoy it as much after playing the other games. I do think the story is really strong here, so it's a shame I don't really care about it at all. I just like to play. What? It's a video game. I think this game was executed perfectly for the time and will always be known as one of the most iconic experiences in all of gaming, but in comparison to the rest of the series, it's gonna rank second to last for me. Coming in at number 5, we actually have Bloodborne. No, I'm just kidding. Please hold your comments and questions and subscribe right now until the end. Number 5 is gonna be Dark Souls 2. I almost put this one a little bit higher, but when I went back to play it, I just couldn't. Also, I just realized
There's
these are
no
all in
way.
order so far, but I have a feeling that'll change soon. Dark Souls 2 almost ranked a bit higher for me because it was by far the most addicted I've ever been to a video game, and I genuinely have no idea why. I played Dark Souls 1 and 3 first, and for some reason this game just got me. This one I actually started during finals week of my
Surprising.
junior year in college, and within 3 days I had over 24 hours.
This is also considered like the worst Dark Souls game out of all of them.
hours played in Dark Souls 2. Needless to say, I had to hit a couple professors up asking if they could round my D- to a B+, but that's why I'm a YouTuber now. All that aside, I really just love the world in this game and the freedom they give you. It feels like a different form of exploration from Dark Souls 1. It's almost hopeful in a sense. They kind of give you hints at things you'll discover
I
later
didn't
on
like
in the
it,
game,
honestly.
so it keeps you
I just
interested
like
to
the
find
game.
out what happens.
So
Majula is also the best hub in the
It,
series
it's
with the best
must be
music.
person by
Don't at
person.
me. Does anyone even say that anymore? And I hate to say it, but I kind of like the quantity approach they did here to some extent. The only reason it ranks lower is because the controls still feel a bit clunky, the agility stat is dumb and makes the first part of the game frustrating, and the bosses are pretty weak for the most part. It also has some of the most aggravating levels, enemies, bosses, you name it. But I still love it for that reason. Oh, and also the fashion, weapon variety, and unique additions like the bonfire aesthetics and fragrant branches of yore are absolutely beautiful. Moving on to number 4, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. Once again, get those little typers ready because we're going with Elden Ring. I don't think I need to explain this one.
Whoa. We're gonna have to talk. Hold on. Elden Ring at 4? You're fucking joking, dude. You're smoking one big. Alright? There's no way. Easily the best in the list.
Much more. Elden Ring is an
I have to
incredible
assume
game,
Sekiro
but
was on the
I personally
list.
prefer a bit more direction in my games, specifically how FromSoft does it, because I think it makes for a more balanced.
I agree with that take. Alright? If you're not a fan of open world games, I understand how you can not like Elden Ring. But that being said, I usually hate open world games and I fucking loved it. So I don't know. To each his own.
Experience. The open world was an awesome feature and I'd love to see them do it again in the future, but I kind of prefer there being a little bit more structure for games like this. A lot of the mini bosses were way too easy for me and it felt like a waste because if they were harder, it would have given me a lot more playtime. But then if I try to keep myself under leveled, the main bosses become way too challenging. It's just a balance I couldn't really find on my own and it took away from a lot of my enjoyment in Elden Ring. Aside from that though, the game feels great. The open world is
I will say that's true too. That's a really good point that he just made. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about that for a minute. It's just like you can't really build how you want to build in this game because if you build how you want to build, at a certain point, bosses will just one tap you, right? Because like for me, when I first played through this game, I played and I didn't have vigor in any of my stats. I didn't go for vigor at all. Because I thought, okay, well, if I get tapped once, I can probably survive a hit no matter what, right? No, at certain points they do kind of BS abilities that you can't dodge, and you just get one tapped. Like it's undodgeable one tap abilities because of the damage they do is so like radiant, and it's kind of annoying to be honest. So I can understand that a little bit. I do understand how, like, some things, like, once you grind it up a little bit, once you've gotten, like, certain items in the game, certain side bosses that you want to experience just kind of, like, feel like a walk. And I've had that same experience as well, too. Like, especially after I got, like, my first weapon upgrade, I went to, like, do a side boss that was, like, out in the open world, and I, like, 3-hit it. And it was like, what? That guy was giving me so much trouble a long time ago. Also, it's a good power fantasy, so that's also a positive, but I mean, if that's not what you're into Souls games for, it makes sense why that would be a problem. Nothing is undodgeable, maybe. Maybe you're right. But I also feel like some of the things that are dodgeable are extremely hard to dodge, if that is the case. To the point to where, like, I think I spent like 3 hours on one guy just trying to get a dodge right, and I don't think I landed it ever out of like 3 hours of attempts. So yeah, there are some bullshit ones for sure. Yeah, that's my point.
It's super fun to explore. There is an absurd amount of content that's worth way more than the price tag, and it's gotta be game of the
Fuck, I remember though, we had a boss that we were fighting. Weren't we fighting one together? Some goddamn bull boss. Wasn't that bull fucking geomancer thing? That fucking geo rock? That thing was bullshit. That was a bullshit boss. Hands down. That boss was not a good fight at all. Yeah, the magma worm. No, not magma worm. The one that's like, it looks like a bull, and it shoots out beams and shit. I remember we went into a mine to kill it, right? That thing was fucking stupid.
The year this year. The weapon and build variety is so much fun to mess around with as well, and I love all the little features they added to make the game more convenient. Another problem I had that I've touched on before is the bosses. It feels like they do too much damage to you but don't have enough health, as opposed to the
the falling star beast. Yeah, that thing was stupid, man. That thing was so dumb. Cause like I swear to God, like it didn't even matter how good you were gonna get fucking clapped by it at some point. It was gonna hit you eventually. And if you didn't have enough vigor, GG, bro.
the other games where bosses do less damage to the player but have massive health pools. I'd rather have more room for error but a longer fight than a boss that will one-shot me in.
I agree with him. I agree with him a lot. He's making good points. He's redeeming the fact that he put Elden Ring so low. But Elden Ring should still not be that low. Maybe number 2. Maybe number 2. Elden Ring's still fantastic.
Instantly if I mess up. I could talk about the pros and cons of this game forever, but I think most FromSoft fans will see where I'm coming from here. I'm not taking anything away from Elden Ring at all. It's just a different type of game than the others. Coming in at number 3, we have Dark Souls 3. This might be a shocker, I know, but keep in mind that it was my first Souls game ever, and have you seen the bosses?
I think that makes sense. Dark Souls 3 is really good from what I've seen. This is one of the games I've not played. So I want to play this at some point. This is the year of RPGs for the channel. So we probably will at some point play this.
This one is extremely biased, being my first Souls game, and I'll never forget beating the Abyss Watchers for the first time and getting that rush that makes these games so addicting. The movement in this game feels great, and I know a lot of people were pissed because the rolls were too fast, but I think they paired this with faster combat to offset the change. Also, don't be a boomer, embrace the change, come on. I will say, after completing all the Souls games, it's definitely one of the easiest, but some of the bosses still give me the most trouble of any game in the series. The endgame and DLC bosses feel perfectly balanced and give you that feeling of satisfaction.
Oh my god, he teleported?
Drives us all to say get good to the random
shit.
kids struggling on the internet. I will say I think most of the levels are pretty unpleasant. If
the boss designs look cool though, and mob design too.
Pretty much all the levels leading up to Irithyll are a pain to go through, not because they're super hard or complicated, they just don't feel super creative or exciting to explore. Another small issue I have is how easy it is to R1 spam through most of the enemies in this game. It's not a huge problem or anything, but
that means Bloodborne's up at the top with Sekiro.
But I still think this game has some of the best and worst enemies in the series, which
I think
made it a bit
Sekiro is probably taking top.
It has some of the highest highs and the lowest lows, but it's probably the game I've completed the most just because the bosses are so
I think Sekiro might be top.
This was the perfect way to end the trilogy. And
Sekiro is like a lot of people's favorite game for like a combat.
Just give me 10 seconds to show you something that'll make your life a lot better. If you want to get access to games and DLCs early or watch.
Yeah, for me, Elden Ring's top. I would say DS1 second right now. I have not played DS3. I want to play Bloodborne, so it's not up there yet. Sekiro's pretty low on my list. I had a really unfun time with that game. And maybe I should revisit it at some point, but I did not have a lot of fun with Sekiro. And maybe that was inexperience, because that Sekiro was my first Soulsborne game. My first one. So perhaps going through and playing it again, I'll feel better playing it than I did then.
Shows you normally couldn't get access to, you can get Atlas VPN right now for only $1.99 per month. Use the link in the description and try it out now. The deal isn't going to last long. Thanks to Atlas VPN.
This guy seems like difficulty. I'm going to say he's going to Sekiro.
Number 2, the runner-up is going to be Bloodborne.
Yep, called it. I called it. Yeah, he seems to like difficulty a lot.
It down for me. I understand why a lot of the huge beast bosses were included here, but I personally prefer the humanoid bosses like Gehrman and Lady Maria, and I wish they had more like them. But the ones they do have are some of the best in the series, and they never get old for me. The setting and theme of this game is a big part of my love, and I think the way they design the world is incredible. On top of that, the level design is amazing, and the way they connected the world was mind-blowing every time. I think everyone loves this game for its horror theme, and it's a shame they still haven't made a remaster. Let's be honest, it's basically a free $70 from all of us if they just remaster the game. One thing I didn't like about this game is how confusing it can be. I played
a remaster or a remake would have me play this game instantly. I'd play the game immediately.
And before you call me an idiot in the comments, I still have feelings. Actually, I'm kind of desensitized at this point, but still I don't want to hear it. The other issues I have with this game are small things that I've touched on before, but things like the finite healing system, trying to farm for blood vials and bullets can be a pain if you use them up early. Not being able to rest or travel from lamps is a pain as well, but that's really more of an inconvenience. The chalice dungeons are one aspect that most people seem to hate, but I actually don't mind them. Sure, they can be a grind, but when you've played through the main game a dozen times already, it's kind of nice to have something optional to switch it up. But I think the core combat elements in this game and the rally system are what really make it great, and I'd love to see this return in a different style, like a Western or a futuristic game from the developers in the future.
Western
or just
be cool.
Bloodborne 2. Anyway, moving on to the one that's gonna piss everyone off the most because it's not even technically a Souls game, we have Sekiro. This went from my least favorite FromSoft game to my favorite in the span of about 6 months. It took me forever to get into this game because I kept trying to play it like a Souls game.
Wait, did he
but
say
on my
honorable
third attempt
mention?
at playing it through again, the combat finally
okay.
clicked with
Number one.
Genichiro. The level design, the combat flow, and the bosses all make this game absolutely perfect for me, and while this became my #1 FromSoft game fairly recently, I think it's gonna stay like that for a while. A lot of people dislike the lack of build variety and say it gives less replayability, but I don't know why I feel like I can keep playing this game over and over without getting sick of it. The boss rush mode really solidified this choice for me as well, giving me the opportunity to fight bosses over and over and really master each one of them. The way I describe this game is the hardest to learn but the easiest to master, and once you master it, it doesn't get boring, it just gets more satisfying. In the other Souls games, if something is too easy, it's just not that fun. In Sekiro, it still gives you that rewarding feeling for each boss because you know their moves so well. The only thing that makes me debate if this game will stay at #1 for me is the lack of content. The main game has tons of things to do, but I really wish they added a DLC or some extra prosthetics to grind for. I think the skills and prosthetic tools are good to give players that feeling of build variety because you can use each one to your advantage for
I think that's the great part about Elden Ring too, Coda, is the fact that you can build your own character, man. Like that's like 90% of the reason why I like it. Is like building my own character. It's an RPG, right? Like this game, like I feel like Sekiro is a linear style story with difficult mechanics, right? And Elden Ring is an RPG. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference between the two. They're almost different genres altogether. So it's kind of hard to compare them really. So this is like this is a linear story about a guy who has a name, which I can't remember his name. I know his name's important. But he is a linear guy with a story about defending his prince, right? Or his king or his lord, right? So it's like an entire thing. It's not like an RPG.
Specific bosses, but I would have loved at least some new weapons like a spear or some daggers. But I think this is the most consistent game in the series and is the closest to perfect I've seen in a video game. Also, someone asked if I could do an outro for this video, and I said bosses, but I would have and is the closest to perfect I've seen in a video game. Also, someone asked if I could do an outro for this video, and I said 9-second intro.
That's so good. That's so fucking good. All right, we'll be right back. We're gonna play Witcher. Thanks for watching, guys.